Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of SBJ Live. I'm Dan Kaufman with Sports Business Journal. Thank you so much for being here. This is Examining the Sponsorship and Media Landscape in Women's Sports. It's presented by our friends at Core. Thank you all for being here. We'll get right into it very quickly, but as people start to trickle in here, there's a few logistics that I go over for every episode of SBJ Live. And so if this is not your first episode, I apologize. Just bear with me because I want to make sure everyone knows how we like to have these things go. The most important thing is that we want you interacting with us. This is a talented and very professional panel that we have up here, but we can't do it all by ourselves. We want interaction from the audience, and it makes for a much better episode if we have your interaction. So what does that mean? In the chat bubble that you see on the lower right-hand side of your screen, you can say hello and tell us where you're coming from and who you are. And I see we've got some people introducing themselves already, which is fantastic. Do that. And then if you see people who you know, message them and say hello. We really encourage it, so don't hesitate to do that. Right next to the chat bubble, there's a questions bubble. That's where we want your questions. There's going to be about 2 moments during this episode where we're going to stop kind of presenting and talking, and we'll see what questions have come through, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. So what that means is throw your questions in there whenever they come into your head. Don't wait until the end. There's not a specific Q&A just at the end. Put the questions in there, and you can also upvote questions that you like, that you see there. Okay, so those are my important logistics. There's not much more beyond that besides to just enjoy and interact with us. I'm going to introduce our panelists very quickly, and then we're going to dive right into it. We've got Eva Reeder, the VP of Marketing at Core. Thank you for being here, Eva. Jess Smith, Head of Revenue at Angel City FC. Thank you, Jess. And Haley Deegan, professional stock car racing driver. Haley, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Eva first, and she's got a few slides she's going to go through, and then we'll start the discussion. Eva, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. As mentioned, I'm Eva Reeder, VP of Marketing at Core. I'm thrilled to be here today talking to you all about the growth of women's sports. It's fantastic to see, and we've got 2 women on the panel here with me that are part of making it happen. So I'm excited for the conversation. But before we dive in, I do want to share a little bit about Core's role in this space and kind of our impact within sponsorship. So for over 20 years, Core's been a platform leveraged by brands, teams, leagues, and agencies to help them better manage and measure and ultimately optimize the performance of their sponsorships. So anything from traditional sponsorship assets and deliverables to most recently where we've been able to expand into social media assets and brand value and exposure across social. And that was a result of a recent acquisition of Hookit that we made last year. And so today we're really going to dig into that social side of things, but collectively Core is an all-in-one solution solving for challenges at every stage of kind of that partnership life cycle. You can really think about us as your one-stop shop for sponsorship management and measurement. So quickly, I do want to touch on our social evaluation model, as it's important to kind of the data and insights that we will discuss today. On the social side of things, Core tracks the entire sport and entertainment ecosystem. Our technology tracks 500,000 athletes, teams, leagues, events, venues, media properties, we also, and plus the 2 billion fan connections and everything that they're posting on social media. And that results in kind of what brand value and exposure are generated from those 2 billion fan kind of posts and connections. And we're adding to it all the time. So when we look at posts, we look at both visual and text promotion. So anytime a logo shows up, or a brand is tagged or mentioned, or there are keywords or hashtags being used, we pick up and identify that as a branded post. And we do differentiate between incidental and deliberate. So incidental meaning, there happens to be a brand logo in the background versus a post that's clearly being promoted by a sponsor or brand. But really there's 6 key factors that go into valuation. And we've created a promotional quality score That's a 0 to 100 score. And that is where we really can help organizations gain insights and improve what they're doing, because we analyze things like logo size, clarity, timing of brand presence, if it's a video, actionability, visibility. So those factors are what we use to identify promotion score. And then we weight it against something that we call our max ad value, which is basically, what would this post have cost as an advertisement, given the engagement, and what it would typically cost to advertise on that particular platform. And then we downweight it back against that promo quality score. So by combining those two factors, we land on our AAV, or adjusted ad value. And that's the number we're really focused on today, and what you'll see in all of kind of the rankings data that we share. That's the number we use to benchmark value that athletes drive or brands receive. And that's what we really mean when we say adjusted ad value. It's really a combination of quality of post and reach, and what it garners to justify its overall value. So that's just kind of a quick overview, and will be helpful as we dig into some of the data. But let's actually get into some of the fun stuff now. So first and foremost, the massive reach of women's sports. So when we look specifically at women's sports and we see some of these numbers, we not only see the large footprint that this industry has across the board on social. You can kind of see it across those major 4 numbers that we kind of are sharing. But women's sports have consistently grown at a rate close to 20% year over year across social for the past 5 years. It's actually 17.8% to be exact. But not only that, but how much of an effect individual female athletes are really contributing to these numbers. Specifically, we're seeing out of that, 122 million in value that brands generated from female sports this past year. Over half of that was based on individual athlete sponsorship. And we look at, those total follower numbers, that 1.5 billion number, 95% of those audiences are following specific athletes over a specific team or league. So that's just an important takeaway, and good for rights holders and brands to be aware of as they look at how to best position themselves for partnerships. So taking this a step further, we're seeing that the interest in women's sports is growing almost double the amount of men's, which is pretty incredible. And even though athletes, as I said, kind of hold the lion's share in terms of engagement, female sports organizations and teams are growing at 3x and 4x rates. So we're really experiencing, a cultural shift in long-term interest in women's sports and athletes across the board. And this is all still kind of while dealing with an uphill battle, with broadcasting and media coverage for women's sports. So it's pretty incredible to see these types of numbers. So that's the macro view, but we wanted to see what sports specifically are seeing the most success across engagement and value over this past year. And luckily for us, we've got individuals from 2 of these top sports on the panel with us today, so they can kind of speak to some of this. But right now, over the past year, these are kind of the top 5 that are driving the most value and engagement for women's sports.
Yeah, amazing. Really, we've got motorsport and global football represented right here. So I feel very lucky. Eva, if I could just jump in for a second, I want to make sure that I plug to the audience who's maybe joined us late that please, I see everyone chatting. Feel free to keep doing that. We love that. And make sure you submit your questions in the questions bubble there. Don't wait till the end to submit them. And in particular, just a heads up that Jess has to leave around the half hour, 35-minute mark. So around 1:05 Eastern, 10:05 Pacific time. So we're going to get to Jess as much as possible before she has to go. And make sure you get your questions in for Jess if you've got them. But Jess, I do have a question. When you look at this and you see global football as number 1, women's top sports, And then the prior two slides kind of talked about the trajectory that we're on and how fast it's growing. Are we doing everything as a sports industry collectively to make sure that that growth continues to get closer and closer to what we see for men's global football?
Great question. The answer is no, if I'm being honest. I think some are, but not everyone is. I think the actuality is that women's sports, and it's not just global football, is a different product than men's sports. And that's its strength, right? Women's sports is a mix of sport and purpose and pop culture. And how you build your assets around that, how you invite your community in to be a part of that, is different and should be treated differently, and then sometimes even measured differently with what the empathy, with what the value set means, especially at this point in time. I think Eva hit it spot on in the data point, also showing that the consumer brain is different now, and social media has done this for years, but it's now very apparent through data, where athletes are the first thing that people will follow, then teams, and then the league. So very similarly, as an industry and as those looking to monetize it, when you're thinking through the traditional revenue streams like broadcast and merchandise, et cetera, the athletes have to have a seat at that table, right? Because of course the teams can be more powerful with the multitude of athletes, and the league even more so when you put all of them together. But being able to harness that differently than the traditional landscape that exists in men's sports is its superpower at hand. And I don't think everybody and every stakeholder has quite figured that out yet. And candidly, while we're seeing immense growth, there's still so much further to go. So while we are on this trajectory, ensuring that the stakeholders like broadcast, league relations, ownership groups, et cetera, continue to funnel in resource to meet the potential, we're early days. So it's incredible to see, because I think most of us can speak honestly and say that it feels like for the first time ever that this is the trajectory that will continue, that there are those long-term opportunities and investments coming in, but there's still a long way to go as well.
Yeah, love that answer. Eva, should we jump to the next slide?
Yeah, absolutely. So we also looked at top female athletes driving value, not just sports. And again, lucky us, we have one of the top athletes driving value on our panel with us today, with Haley. And what's particularly interesting about this list specifically is that, motorsports is actually responsible for 30% of the top female athletes generating value, which is more than any other sport in the top 10. So, we'll pass it back over to you, and Dan and Haley, to talk a little bit about this.
Yeah. I mean, and we just lost Haley. I hope she's coming right back, because it'd be tough. But I can tell you that, the interesting thing that I find here is the fact that motorsport is up there in the top 10 3 times. Global football is up there number 1, Jess, obviously, but only one athlete represented from global football, if I'm looking at it correctly. Haley, we got you back. Oh no. All right, she should be back momentarily. It does seem like she's trying to get here. There's a question that came in from the audience, and maybe this is a good time to shift to it, and then we'll see when Haley jumps back on if we can talk a little bit about her reaction to this. But Jess, maybe you can touch on this question, or Eva, you as well. It's from Frank Brown. Oh, there's Haley. All right.
I don't know
Haley,
why it keeps disconnecting on me.
Oh no. All right. So Frank, thank you for the question. I'll get to it in just a minute. But while we have you, Haley, 3 motorsport athletes here, including you. Did you know that? How do you react to that? Did you know that motorsport was the top 10, the 3 in the top 10?
So because I'm friends with both those 2 people, 2 other girls. So I obviously I follow them on social media, and I actually grew up, Amanda, who's number 8. I actually grew up racing off-road trucks with her. So we got started in the same type of racing, which is super rare, very, very rare, especially that not many people come from off-road racing. So I'm definitely well aware of their social media following and presence out there in the motorsports world.
Yeah. Were you aware, though, of the level of popularity of motorsport as compared to, say, at least from the data we see here, soccer, football?
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's not separated, there's not a specific league for females in racing, that it almost maybe helps that a little bit and jumpstarts it a little bit more, because we're in the men's league. It's for everyone. And so if everyone's able to be a part of it. So I think because of that, there's a much bigger audience or at least like a broad platform for people to have something to grow off of, instead of just being sectioned male or female.
Interesting. Thank you. All right, let's jump to the next slide, please.
Yeah, so finally we did a ranking on top brands generating value within women's sports. So, you've got your usual suspects here with Nike and Adidas, Emirates, Red Bull generating top value for their brands. But it's interesting to see brands like Rogue, Free UK also, clutching these kind of top spots. Rogue is really a result of the rise and cultural phenomenon that's taking place with functional fitness and fitness influencers. Rogue is a fitness and gym and equipment brand. And then 3UK gains almost all of their value from their single shirt sponsorship with Chelsea FC. Another interesting call out is Kazoo, which is an online kind of car retailer, where you can really see the power of one athlete and what one athlete can do for a brand. I mean, Alicia Lehman, she currently holds the #1 spot for athletes generating the most value across women in sports. So she's been an absolute game changer for Kazoo. And it is pretty striking to see this top 10 list. And Kazoo's the only brand within the top 10 that's only partnering with one athlete and still, garnering that much value to be within the top 10. So that's a pretty interesting kind of call out again to the power of specific athletes and what female athletes can do in the sponsorship space.
Before we get here, maybe let's go back to Frank's question if we can, Eva. But you can flip the slide. Let's just let Frank get his voice heard here. Frank, thank you for the question. If you've got questions, go ahead and submit them, especially if they're for Jess, because unfortunately we've got her for another 15 minutes or so. Frank Brown says, in your experience, what are the 3 most important elements in reaching and connecting with, on an emotional level, the widest audience? Haley, can I start with you on that one? What do you think through when you think about, the way that something's going to reach the widest audience on an emotional level?
Yeah, I think that when it comes down to it, not just showing what you do within that sport, whether it's motorsports, whatever sport it is, I think people attract to relatability and being able to go and look at other people and say, oh, I do that. Oh, I can go out and buy that product. Oh, they use the same thing that I do or do the same thing that I do. And I think that that's something that's huge for reaching a wide audience, because quite frankly, there's a lot of people that follow me that don't watch racing. And they follow me because of other aspects of my life, whether it's driving off-road vehicles in my front yard, or it could be me posting about my dog, or whatever it is. I think that showing people your true life and the reality of what you do day to day, being open with that, sharing your journey, whether the highs, the lows, something that people can relate to and not just feel like you're a cardboard cutout with followers and posting these things that are just super plain and boring.
Mm-hmm. Jess, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just agree that even from a property standpoint, the reason I mentioned earlier is that we're a mix of sport and purpose and pop culture is you're always looking at 2 things. One, you're looking at user acquisition. We want more people to follow us and to make sure that we're reaching new audiences that may pique their interest. But 2 is once you understand your audience, kind of starting to figure out, Haley, what they want to see from you. And you can obviously measure that through the engagements that you're seeing as well. And so for us, some of the data that we're seeing now, which is really exciting for us and all of women's sports, is that we have a lot of non-traditional sports fans following what we're doing, buying merchandise. They might not follow global football or football at all, but they're feeling a connection to our brand and how we're building it. So really, as we're starting to nurture that through the connection that we have specific to social media, all of that's top of mind, right? So they're looking to us to create that community, to curate it, as well as be a badass football team. And how you balance those things with your audience is part of the expertise, that you hire against.
Yeah. Frank, thanks for the questions. Thanks for the answers from Haley and Jess. Eva, I'm going to flip it back to you. Let's talk about how you secure a sponsorship.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's part of kind of what CORE's tools can do for our clients. And what we did was actually, do spotlights on Angel City and on Haley, really specifically to show kind of both of their impacts in their respective space. I mean, Jess, I'll let you talk to this slide completely, but what really stood out to us was the immense year-over-year growth that Angel City FC has seen. Obviously, it's a new club, but you guys have done incredible things in a short period of time.
No, thank you. How we approached our partnerships enabled us to create content that was really genuine to our fans and candidly invite our partners in to be part of something greater. For those that may not be aware of it, when we started Angel City, we made a commitment that we're a place where revenue and impact meet. That candidly, the best way for us to continue to push forward the equity that we seek in women's sports is to be profitable and to show that there are dollars and value in what we're building. And so with that, we also want to make sure that we are also providing impact. We don't want to be a team that sits up here and talks about how things are inequitable, how we want to pay our players more money. We want to talk about that and find solves for it, but then also think about the root of the problem of inequities and make sure that we're funding that. So in each partnership that we have, 10% goes directly back into one of our shared pillars of equity, essentials, or education. So for us, that comes to life in ways like DoorDash. We don't want to ignore food insecurity, given that Los Angeles at the time of COVID was close to 30% food insecure. If you're not fed, you can't get on the pitch to play soccer at any level of play equity, which we also do work in. So we just surpassed feeding 1 million people in that partnership, but 10% of our partnership goes directly back into that. Birdies, who you see mentioned here, they're an incredible women's shoe brand, super comfortable if you haven't tried them yet. We provide a youth internship program to diverse young women in high school because we view college even as a barrier to entry to both the sport and fashion realms of creating diverse pipelines of even front office talent. And with every partner that we have, there's a reason that we come together and a why. And so the content that we're creating is really built on a foundation of value set, right? So we're talking about why we came together in the first place, how we have those shared values, and then what that looks like coming together with stakeholders like our owners, our players, community, et cetera. And so seeing that growth, to us is also showcasing that what we built and how we built it is something that's gaining trust in the marketplace, that people are talking about and sharing and bringing people back into that ecosystem to view that versus, only doing things like sweepstakes or, other more tactical approaches, which we certainly infiltrate as well. But the growth that we've seen is certainly for us on the sponsorship side and content side, where that sets a testament to how we've built it in the first place to mean something more than just sponsored content.
I'd love to jump in here. We do have an audience question, but I have a question for you, Jess. I'm curious, just even like if you could give us a sense of the size of your team that you oversee, the sponsorship team in particular, and how that compares relative to maybe other divisions within your club. And then also, second part of that question, you can take either one or both, is when hiring within your division, was there a different thought process that you went through versus if you were working at a men's club versus the women's club, given what you told us about the differences?
Yeah, I'll start on the latter piece of that. And the answer is yes. What we're selling is emotional. What we're selling is growth. What we're selling has not been done before. And so finding someone that personally embodies what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're questioning everything around us to help propel women's sports forward is a big piece of being the voice out in the business community, right? It's not necessarily about having the tactics of LED time. You can buy LED time from whoever you would like to, and it's valuable in a variety of different ways depending on what your goals are. Why you would partner with Angel City or within women's sports is a different thing that everyone is working toward together. So having somebody or those on our team understand that and be able to talk about that while also having the finesse of understanding the sponsorship world and connecting those is really important. So definitely a different approach versus just, hey, how's your sales record, right? And like coming in and who's your Rolodex and what are your connections? I'd say the other side is we're finding a lot of success. And I think women's sports, again, like one of the differentiators is working with brands that have never done quote unquote sports sponsorship before, right? I think there is so much more room at the table with the consumers and through the athletes of seeing what those brands are that aren't just the traditional insurance and QSRs, et cetera. While those are very important clients to us, it also opens up another door of who hasn't been invited in to learn about this and see what the value could be moving forward. The second piece of that is probably why, I'm so tired all the time. So when we began Angel City, candidly, we were a handful of us making this work and giving it a go. So it started with me. I signed personally the, probably 12 to 14 partners right out of the gate in 2020. And as I did that, I hired into that growth. And so we have one additional salesperson, an incredible senior director in Alex Mellon. We are hiring a second person under her. But I think where your question's going is also how we've structured our partnerships is that it's also transformed how a sports front office is staffed to support revenue in totality, right? Yeah. So it's not segmented where in most teams you have a sponsorship department and a ticketing department department and a community department. Sometimes they overlap and like do things together. Ours is, because everything is thread through revenue and impact together, we need the content team to basically be staffed to, make sure they're integrating these partnerships just as we would a PM team. We need a community team. We have, we have a member on our community team that speaks directly to our clients as they're bringing these programs to fruition as well. So we certainly look at resources in other departments versus just in sponsorship. I think non-traditionally compared to the men's teams, at least I've had an opportunity to work for.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And on the next slide, am I right that Eva, we talk a little bit about okay, we're going to jump to Haley. Sorry. Before we do that, let's go to an audience question, I think, if we could, because it's a really good one and it's going to tie everything together here. And it's one from Michael Jaquette. The question is this: the leagues and teams provide the platforms and infrastructure for the athletes to be featured and discovered. And then the leagues and teams then send audiences to the athletes' handles, maybe not directly, but certainly through TV and overall press coverage to them. How can leagues and athletes best work together on the pitch? Jess, I'll stick with you and then we'll jump to see what Haley thinks.
I think this is going to all change soon. I think the Messi deal is a really unique point in time to see how that can all come together for everyone's benefit, right? Certainly he's going to have value. MLS is going to have value. Apple TV is going to have value, and how those entities and Adidas like coming together, make sure that they can find a solution for everyone's benefit is going to, I think, disrupt the world of sport in a really interesting way, similar to how you saw Jordan do it back in the day with his deal with Nike, right? Yeah. So I think that's a really interesting space to watch. I think at this point in time, it's really about making sure that everyone understands how they benefit from one another and what they get to candidly like monetize and how, right? Like right, wrong, or indifferent, wearing a logo on a jersey, that is on players, personal platforms as well, right? Like, so like those types of partnerships should be garnering more money because of how diverse its reach is compared to some of the founding level partnerships. And also finding ways for us, we build in revenue for content appearances for all of our players into every partnership that we have, because we think it's important that, the voices of our whole organization are a part of every partnership. Obviously the payers are paid to do that. And then we encourage separate endorsement deals as well. But I think the separate endorsement deals is going to be also a big piece of moving forward to be able to see those top, brands that are doing it well, really taking that to heart and finding the individual voices that represent their brand alongside the teams and the leagues too. Yeah.
Haley, before I jump to you, Jess, if you have to drop, I want to make sure I thank you before you do. When you do drop, just give us a wave and we'll thank you for coming. So thank you very much, Jess, and best of luck with the rest of the season.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, Haley, to kind of I'm sorry, maybe we should jump ahead. Did you want to?
I was just going to say, we've got this.
Okay,
if Jess, before you go, if you want to speak to this really quickly, this was kind of our conversation around, fan engagement and content creation. So these were the top 3 most engaged posts, most valuable posts, and watched posts for Angel City FC. Outside of these posts specifically, just curious to learn a little bit more about kind of the content strategy that Angel City has, given, how successful it's been.
Absolutely. Our content strategy, not unlike anyone else's, is really about engagement, but then also always going back to reinstating what our values are. Our head of community puts this best in that every facet of our business, we're looking to invite people in to be a part of progress and change. It's never calling people out, but it's inviting them in. And social media is no different than that. And so we want them to feel a part of what we're doing, whether it's our investors, where you see Eva Longoria and Jen Garner there, having the time of their lives, celebrating a goal, which, rightfully so with their likeness, garners a lot of attention, pun intended with Garner. Way to go, Jess. Or we're talking through some of the athlete stories or watching their incredible feats on the field with a partner or without, with Johnny Walker, et cetera. So it's not, I think, anything indifferent to being reactive to what's happening in real time. And what you'll see is a mix of these posts. And I think when you get to the off season, what's really interesting is in following us, there's a lot more storytelling. There's a lot more community engagement. There's a lot more of us using our voice for non-soccer related things and making sure that we stay relevant that way too. We consider ourselves a 365 property, right? We have 14 games, at home. We have 28 games in total moving into next year. That said, when we are on our social media platforms, we're 365.
Thank you, Jess. Really appreciate it. Virtual round of applause for Jess. Thanks so much for joining us. We've got plenty more with Haley. Don't go anywhere. let's see. A plug for questions. If you got questions, make sure you put them in the questions tab. Let's go back to this slide, Haley. Let's talk about your brand value, and I'll flip it over to Eva to kind of get us going here.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So with Haley's brand value, I mean, what's really incredible to see, and as we kind of have talked about already with the top athletes generating value across the board, not only is Haley top 6 across all athletes, but she's number 2 within motorsport specifically, which is incredible to see. So, some high level numbers on, the value that your brand is garnering, which is incredible. And some of your top sponsors or sponsorships. And just curious, from your perspective, how have you gone about building such a successful personal brand? How you look at partnerships and how you select those, given that, it's really personal to you, and would love to kind of hear your approach to sponsorships and partnerships and that piece of it for you.
Yeah, I think when it comes to sponsorships, partnerships, even previous partnerships that we already have, the biggest thing is working with people who have the same mindset as you, the same goals, and really have trust in you and what you're doing and what you're posting on social media. At the end of the day, I feel like there's a lot of people with followers that have figured out the social media game, and there's certain brands that come into that. There's certain ones that want to kind of give their input and change what they're already doing, but I feel like the best partnerships are the brands that come in and give you control to let you do what you normally do, but also integrating their brand naturally in. Ford does a great job of that with me. You Monster, everybody that I have in my circle, and I keep my circle small, whether it comes to selling deals and the people and sponsors we let into it, but I think doing that makes it so much more powerful.
Haley, how do you work on developing your content, like your social media content? Do you have like a bunch of people around you that are kind of scripting the things here? Or maybe at this point you do, but initially, was it just you? Like, give me just some of the thought process of like how you got going and how you like to do it.
Yeah, that's where I'm a little bit different. I feel like the most drivers in general is a lot of them will their effort of doing social media as an athlete in motorsports is hiring someone to film them walking to the grid or film them doing their kind of normal deal and not showing much of their personal life, just kind of showing at the racetrack, which I don't really like sometimes, because most of the time people can see that on TV. You want to give people a different aspect of showing you what happens before the race, your pre-race conversations with crew chiefs, breaking down how your car, your truck felt. And those are things that we've really valued. And my team's small. When it comes to my social media team, I am super, super picky about who has access to my social media channels. I am the only one that posts on my Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And I actually have an editor who edits my YouTube videos. I approve them all before they go out. Obviously, with me filming and stuff at the track, I kind of know what to say at certain points so that it doesn't take away from my racing, but also gets the point across in our YouTube videos of what we're trying to accomplish. So it's definitely a small team. It's me and one other person, but I've had the options of having other people run it or produce the content and post it. But I have strayed away from that because I do not like other people posting on my social media channels. I want it to be true. I want it to be authentic. And I want it to really be able to show people that, like, hey, you can do this yourself. You don't have to have someone else do it for you. And look how much more powerful it is when you do it yourself.
Yeah, love it. All right, should we go to the next slide, Eva? Oh, yes.
Yeah, so this is diving back into that discussion around fan engagement and content creation. So Jess spoke to that a little bit, but Haley, would love you to kind of continue that conversation as well. These were your top posts kind of over the past year.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add something to that. I apologize for interrupting, but I was going to just say, like, I'd love to just hear really, like, when looking at your most engaged posts here, your most valuable posts, like, did you have a feeling going into it that this is going to be the good one? Or there's some that just surprised you and there were some that you thought were going to be great and they just did not perform, so to speak?
I think when it comes to the YouTube side of things, which is the middle, the post there in the middle, right there, that was my announcement for my first Xfinity start. I knew that one was going to do good. And so I had a feeling going into it because always big announcements do very good on social media. But when it comes to like the post on the left, the Instagram post, I feel like when it comes to posting on social media, girls, guys, whoever it is in the motorsports world, I feel like being able to make it a little more personable, not just posting a picture of your car or your truck on the track, showing kind of a face with that. And it gives people some sort of connection to be able to say like, oh, look, they're in their driving suit. They're not just a video of them driving around in their car or an edit of that. Like, it shows a little more personableness with it.
We've got a few more minutes here and we'll get to some more slides, but I want to make sure that I encourage everyone, if you got questions for Haley, put them in the questions tab. I do see that it looks like someone put a question in here that's just unfinished in the chat tab. Oscar Delgado, curious, what is the biggest or most common, but then you've left us hanging. So Oscar, if you've got that question, pop it in the questions tab. That's the best place to do it. Let's see.
Oh, Dan, I can actually read the whole question on my
I can't see it. I'll go ahead then.
So I can read it and answer to it, Oscar.
Yeah.
So his question was, what is the biggest or most common misconception about sponsorship and media landscape in women's sports? And I guess on my end, it's probably, that there is limited interest or limited engagement. And I think that's, some of the data that we were able to share earlier on this call is really counteracting that. And even, that slide that we shared about the top sports across women's sports, there's really some opportunities there when you look at, functional fitness and tennis specifically. Those numbers were showing that the sponsorship value was relatively low, but the engagement was incredibly high. And so there's opportunities there for brands to get creative, to partner with some of those athletes and really capitalize on this market that's seeing a ton of engagement and growth.
Eva, maybe that's a really good segue to our next section on how to work with brands and advice there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Haley, we'll kind of go to you as giving you a lot of expertise in working with brands and building those partnerships. But just real quickly, we did an overview of kind of the top posts for brands this past year. So Red Bull, AT&T, and the United States Air Force have had the top posts in terms of generating value for those brands. And we've kind of done some call outs on why that might be, and some keys to success of, what brands can do to create really successful posts. But yeah, Haley, would love your perspective on, again, what kind of posts are generating the most value for you, what you advise brands to do, and how you work with brands specifically to make sure that your content is successful, but also authentic.
Yeah, I think when it comes to creating the content and working with the brands, that's where you always figure out kind of that first run of content that you're doing for a brand, how it's going to play out, like that partnership and relationship, whether you're going to be in full control of it. And I always try to clarify this in the beginning when working with partners is like, hey, I'll be super clear on it. Like, this is, if you guys give me some rough guidelines to work within these means, and I can go from there, that's perfect. And I always try to clarify those things with partners in the beginning. And I feel like if you start it like that, it automatically starts out on a good foot to where, okay, this is, as long as I work within these means, we're good. And you're able to kind of go from there. So I think it really depends on the partner and which sponsor it is. I think it's different across the board with all brands and what they're trying to accomplish, whether it's the platforms they're posting on. I know that there's brands like, say, Ford. I know they're very big on Instagram, and Monster loves Instagram and YouTube. So I think that's where it differentiates from other partners, is in the beginning of the relationship saying, okay, what's your goals when it comes to social media? What channels do you guys really push? Which ones do you not put much effort into? And I've tried to build up all my social media platforms to where I'm able to leverage that based on what the partner wants. And so they're like, hey, we really love Twitter and TikTok. I go, okay, we'll focus on those two things. And so I'm really able to build all around that so that they really get the best experience possible and the most engagement off of it.
We've got another question that just came in from Nancy Lowe. Nancy says, which platforms are working best for women's sports and athletes? Is Twitter/X still relevant, or is there an alternative? Eva, what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, so there are platforms that we are seeing that are performing better for women specifically. Instagram's still a player, but TikTok certainly is seeing a ton of engagement, especially with that younger generation. I mean, from our perspective, we still always look at it from a holistic approach of it's important to be in a lot of different places to make sure you're reaching unique demographics, but specifically as of late, we're seeing TikTok really dominate in terms of engagement specifically with fans and those, short reel content.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Nancy. Haley, I've got one more for you before we go on to the next section. Don't name names, but has there been a brand that you were in discussions with or approached you and it's just what they wanted you to do just was not authentic to what you felt like your brand was and you turned it down?
Yes. And there's
Fair enough.
brands, I think we've had brands to where we would start working with them. And when there is too much control trying to go on of saying, hey, this is exactly, you're going to post this post that we made for you, like an overlay or something where they crop you into an image. And this is the exact caption you're going to say. I don't like doing stuff like that. And I always try to be super nice and really work with people about it. But if it doesn't work out and that's what they want, that's what they want. And usually I try to nicely part ways and on good terms, because you never know what direction the brand's going to go. And I think when it comes to also the comfortability side of kind of what I feel comfortable representing, because at the end of the day, if I'm going to partner with somebody, I'm just not going to partner with anybody. There's certain brands that I don't feel comfortable partnering with based on what they represent. So I think that that's something that also plays a big part of going, okay, being self-aware to know who I am, what I like, and what I want to represent. Because the moment I sign with a sponsor or a partner, I automatically will be a part of that brand and be associated with it. My name, my likeness, and that's something that's huge for me, is having a good image and portraying a good image to be motivational to other people and inspirational to other people.
Very well said. Thank you, Haley. We've got maybe time for a few more audience questions if there are some. So if you've got them, plug them into the questions bubble there and we'll get to them. But I think, Eva, will probably flip now to our key takeaways. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Haley, I'd be curious to see if there's anything you'd add to this as well. But I think we touched on a lot of this as we spoke today. Authenticity is key. Haley spoke to that quite a bit about making sure that your partners or athletes' personality is really taken in consideration. If you're a brand looking for, really authentic, organic engagement, that's the way to go. Creativity and collaboration. A lot of those posts that we've seen, they're doing something different and unique, or they're funny. That really stands out. That gets people engaged. As we talked about with kind of platforms, making sure that you've got a multi-channel approach and that you're using different platforms to hit different demographics, and you're thinking about them as unique platforms. Like not all are created equal, and you might want to have different content for different platforms. Clear objectives, that's super important. Haley spoke to that as well. Making sure that your brand is coming to your partner with clear objectives of what you want a campaign to look like, what both parties are trying to get out of it. And actually, Jess was a really good representative of the social responsibility piece. Doing what you can with your platform to engage in important issues and try to contribute to positive change. That's really the audience right now specifically is really receptive to that and kind of expecting that more and more these days from brands. And then really curious to your perspective on this, Haley, as well. But, playing the long game, sometimes we see brands asking for 3 posts or 5 posts with a partner. And really that can only do so much, and really looking at these as long-term partnerships in order to garner that long-term engagement that you're ultimately searching for. It's important to kind of invest in your partners, be thoughtful about it, and make sure it's a long-term investment, because some of those, short, quick post here, post there, really isn't going to move the needle on a more sophisticated social media audience these days.
Yeah, and kind of to go along with that, so I'm not afraid to hop into short-term partnerships if it's a brand that I really want to be associated with. Just because I know if I truly love the brand, use their product, and have the same values that they do, that we're going to accomplish something big together. And so I'm not afraid to hop into those short-term ones because I know it could potentially grow to a long-term one if everything is done right. So that's why I can't tell you how many partnerships I've had to where it was a 2 post deal and literally a month deal that we were able to do that turned into year to multi-year deals. And so I think that that's something that's super, super cool to do, is not being afraid to align with, say it's a brand aligning with an influencer or an athlete, that it could potentially grow into something else. And then when you learn about all the connections that, say, this athlete or influencer has, maybe there's something you guys can do on the B2B side to be able to get them in more stores, or say it's gas stations, whatever it is, to be able to create more revenue for the influencer to do more with and more posts for the brand, and just keep that kind of ball rolling.
Well, Eva, I truly value your partnership with Sports Business Journal. Thank you to you and to Core for helping us put this together. We're going to end here. And Haley, a round of applause for you for taking the time, and best of luck with everything you've got left over your amazing career, which I'm sure is going to be even better than we've seen thus far. So thank you so much for everything. To the audience, thank you for being here. We do this nearly every week. So come back again. We've got another one next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.